Hello, everybody. It's Sunday. You know what time it is. It's time for the Expendable Show. I'm your host, the Expendable. So, the show today is brought to you by Gatsby Trading Solutions, Montezuma, Georgia. And also, see, I'm starting to get a little bit more techie with my show. So I'm going to be starting to do more graphics. And also, new news. Gary Michaels. I will be doing the bookings and management of Gary Michaels, and specifically with his independent shows. And this one, it's a big gig that I'm running around promoting all over the place with Russ Nagel, who's very, very funny, world-renowned comedian, and Phil Donlin, who's on TV on Chicago Fire. He's a very Brooklyn. And he's like, yeah, forget about it. But their big tour in 2026 is Bikes, Babes, and Belly Laughs. And we will be trying to bring it everywhere. I just booked some stuff in Savannah, Georgia. So I'm looking forward to that in my new Whenever I Got Time venture. So actually, it's funny because Gary Michaels is originally from Paris, Kentucky, which is where we met each other through my investigation in Kentucky. But ironically, he lives like 15 minutes away from me. It's really weird how that works. But he's a good guy. We had lunch the other day, and he was just walking around the streets of Covington, Georgia, just doing his little gig with people. And like, he's very impressive and like had people wowing. He's a very, very good performer. So if y'all know some venues that want to book him, let me know. We'll go wherever, especially like Bora Bora and, like Fiji, maybe like the Galapagos Islands, Easter Island. We'll go to Easter Island too. We'll do a show right on top of them little statues they got there of them big giant stone heads. Wherever there's palm trees, preferably. I mean, we'll go where it's cold, but, I'm trying to retire from snow. But that's it. I'll be booking for him. Exciting. I love it. So let's get into, if you like my show, like, subscribe, ding the bell. I think I already said that, but I don't know. I guess I was distracted by stuff. I think I'm being fact-checked already. Let's see what my fact-checkers. Fix the mic? Are you kidding me? Why does my mic always want to do that? Okay, hopefully that fixes it. I don't know why. My mic just goes off to the default, like on its own. I don't know why it does that. It's annoying. So let's go into the statistics today. And our statistics are Doge hasn't done anything. So I'm pretty much going to stop paying attention to the Doge counter. It's kind of worthless at this point. That was out of all the things Trump's done, Doge turned into a huge failure. So gas prices are at $3.05 on average a gallon. They were $2.49 here in Locust Grove. So that's where we're at in gas. Holy bejesus. Okay, I fixed the mic. Good. Mortgage rates that we were down in the 5.8 on the average. We're back up to 5.990 on the average. Now that's I take that off of Zillow. I try to use the same sources every time so I can show the consistency. For those of you who don't ever watch my show or watching it for the first time, Trump's approval rating 45.1%, and on Friday the Dow Jones closed at 47,207.12. So we've got a strong market. The Democrat Party's approval rating is 34.7%. However, that may change now that the Antifa camps have been broken up in Portland. They finally went out and destroyed them. They're trying to spread this propaganda all over social media. The Antifa people are that ICE is at war with the Portland PD. But I've watched so many videos of the Portland PD are actually the ones tearing up the Antifa camps. So nice try, wrong guy, idiots. So one thing I want to talk about today, and this is kind of a big thing that's not really getting a whole lot of traction in the major media, and it should. So there, a lot of people don't know this, but there's a giant massacre going on in Nigeria. It's basically a holy war going on over there. The Muslims in Nigeria are killing the Nigerian Christians, and it's getting bad. And it's to the point where I think J.D. Vance has spoken about it now. Ted Cruz spoke about it. So I think it's something that that Trump's going to probably say something about here before long. So going into that, so over 56,000 people have been killed in Nigeria due to ethnic and religious violence since 2019. So this has been going on for 6 years. At least that's how long they've been counting. The Christians are pretty much the dominant group being affected. In the first 7 months of 2025, over 7,000 Christians have been massacred and nearly 8,000 are abducted. And that's according to International Society for Civil Liberties and Rule of Law. There's several areas that are kind of the target areas, and I don't know anything about Nigeria, so this is going to be mumbo jumbo to me. But Benue, Plateau, and Southern Kaduna, those are apparently states in Nigeria. They're the hardest hit areas, with mass killings often targeting Christian farming communities. So it's a problem. So the main perpetrators are the jihadist groups like Boko Haram, ISWAP, which is the Islamic State West Africa province. They've been responsible for the mass killings, especially in the Northeast. The Fulani herdsmen militias, often described as ethno-religious actors, they've been linked to attacks on Christian villages in the Middle Belt, driven by land disputes and resource scarcity. The Fulani herdsmen killed at least 9,153 Christian civilians between 2019 and 2023. So this is something that needs to get addressed on a global stage. While some U.S. officials and commentators like Ted Cruz, even Bill Maher has spoken about this and that it needs attention. They've labeled the violence a Christian genocide. Nigerian officials and some analysts argue this oversimplifies a multi-phase crisis. So there's land and resource conflicts going on over there that's contributing between herders and farmers. So it's like the herders are generally the Muslims and the farmers are the Christians. So they're also claiming there's climate change issues, blah, blah, blah. Nobody cares about that. Weak governance, poverty and corruption, and ethnic rivalries and criminal banditry. So there's issues that need addressed there. The Nigerian government denies that Christians are being systemically targeted, calling such claims misinformation that could inflame tensions. However, I'm pretty sure I've looked into the actual situation very in depth, and it does appear to me to be a genocide of Christians. However, rights groups and Christian leaders argue that the government has failed to protect vulnerable communities and often censors reports of attacks, which is what I've been seeing. The U.S. and international observers remain divided. Some advocate for Nigeria to be designated a country of particular concern, which it should have been a long time ago. And that's for religious freedom violations. So that's it on Nigeria. I'm going to keep a close eye on that. I've mentioned it a few times in some of my podcasts, but it's something that's getting worse. So we're going to talk about it as it gets worse. Hopefully somebody does something about it. So ICE had a big bust, and I think it's notable to talk about. So ICE and Homeland Security investigations agents in Laredo, Texas, arrested a father and son accused of smuggling hundreds of firearms, including rifles, magazines, and ammunition, into Mexico. After Customs and Border Protection officers discovered hidden compartments in 2 trailers at the U.S.-Mexico border. On October 23rd, the Border Patrol officers working at the Laredo Bridge 2 port of entry stopped 2 southbound vehicles towing box trailers for inspection. Agents said they noticed irregularities in the trailer walls, so those agents did an excellent job. Good work, fellas. A secondary inspection revealed false compartments packed with an arsenal, roughly 400 firearms of various calibers, high-capacity magazines, thousands of rounds of ammunition. So I have a picture, and we will put that up. So there you go. Those are all guns wrapped up and stuffed in this trailer. That is a stack of guns. That's insane. They did a pretty good job trying to hide it, but luckily our Border Patrol down there is not stupid. So HSI officials, which Homeland Security, said the guns were headed into Mexico, where cartels fuel ongoing violence. So these guns were basically sold to the cartels. These guns were there to kill people. And our Border Patrol agents saved probably hundreds of lives by catching this truck. Well, there were 2 of them. The drivers were identified as Emilio Ramirez Cortez. He was a lawful permanent resident, and his son, Edgar Ramirez Diaz, he's a U.S. citizen. Both were arrested on charges of federal firearm smuggling and turned over to the U.S. Marshal Service pending an initial court appearance. So that is an interesting bust that the Border Patrol had. So congratulations, fellas. Big bust, big stop. That's what we pay the taxpayer money to do. Keep people safe. Okay, so next is one of my big headlines of the day. The NBA gets busted in a giant gambling ring. Who would have thought that there's gambling in professional sports? I literally, it's funny. Now all these, I'm watching TikTok and everybody's going through all the games over the weekend going, I know people are throwing games out there. And there was one game, I think it was Alabama, and I forget who they played. I think it might have been South Carolina, where the Alabama player, and this was like late in the game, if the dude would have just tackled the Alabama player, the game would have, South Carolina probably would have won the game. But it was like Alabama ran like a little sweep play along the sidelines, and this guy had the perfect angle. He was right there. The sideline's like right here. The Alabama player's running. He had the perfect angle to just push him out of bounds, and he stuck his hands up in the air and let the guy run and score. I was like, what the heck? Like, how are you going to live that down in the film room? If I was on that team, I'd be all over that dude at film. Like, bro, what are you doing? Like, whose team are you on? Are you transferring to Alabama next year or something? But to me, that looks like somebody who's involved in a gambling scheme to make sure that Alabama covers the spread or doesn't cover. I don't remember what the spread was in the game, but I would assume that Alabama was heavily favored against South Carolina, so they probably already blew the spread. Anyway, there's so much going on. There was a couple NFL games that were kind of questionable last week that people were looking at. I don't remember who they were. But let's get into the NBA because that's what the big news is, and there's a lot to cover. So the FBI's October 2025 bust exposed a sprawling illegal gambling ring involving NBA figures and 4 major mafia families, with over 30 indictments tied to rigged poker games and insider sports betting. So that's a big deal, and there's a lot of different commentary going on about that, and I'll give you mine once we go through the facts. One of the people involved was Chauncey Billups, who I didn't like him when he was a player. I didn't like him. He sucked. But he was charged for participating in rigged high-stakes poker games linked to Mafia families, allegedly acting as a face card to lure victims into games rigged with high-tech cheating tools. They had like x-ray machines, card readers, they had all this stuff. He was placed on immediate leave by the NBA, rightfully so. I mean, that's not really an NBA problem there. That is a actual criminal problem, which all these are criminal problems. But Chauncey Billups' crimes didn't really have anything to do with like the NBA per se. Terry Rozier, however, he's a current NBA player. Well, he was. He's on the Miami Heat, and he's a guard, and he's actually kind of a good player. And he's accused of sharing insider NBA information to aid illegal sports betting. That's an NBA and a criminal problem. Allegedly manipulated performance in games to benefit co-conspirators. So he was previously investigated for suspicious betting activity in 2023. So this guy has a history. So if anybody's getting busted, he's already on the radar. Why would he continue to do these things? Well, because I think the NBA was allowing it to happen. I think Adam Silvers knew, which Adam, for those of you who don't know, Adam Silvers is the commissioner of the NBA. I can't stand him. He looks like a creepy alien. But he's I think they all know about it. Obviously, I think this is a big racket that they all kind of participate in at some point. Now, Damon Jones is another one. He played for the Cleveland Cavaliers, amongst other teams. He was charged in both the poker and sports betting schemes. So this is where we can tie the poker games to the NBA point shavings. It's obviously ran by the same organization, and they're using the NBA players to do these things. Now, the Mafia involvement, this is where we're going to cover the Mafia. So the FBI named 4 of New York's 5 families, which is the Bonanno, Gambino, Genovese, and the Lucchese. So those are the 4 families. There's actually 5. One apparently didn't get invited to the party or something. However, it's a big deal because, you know, what are they? Oh, the Mafia doesn't exist anymore. Yes, the Mafia very much does exist. People who think the Mafia doesn't exist anymore are in denial. They've been in existence. And we'll talk more about how I know these things in towards the end of the show, because this story ties into my investigation. So these groups allegedly backed the poker ring and used rigged games to steal millions of dollars. This is a multi-million-dollar racket. So they used some of the equipment. They used x-ray tables, hidden cameras, pre-marked cards, contact lenses, self-shuffling machines altered to read and transmit card data. So they had a quarterback at the table. He received signals from the off-site operators and relayed winning hands to co-conspirators. So this was a multi-person operation as far as the gambling, the card gambling, the poker games went. The victims were called fish and lured by the presence of NBA stars. That's easy bait. Hey, I'm Chauncey Billups, man. I heard you're a good card player. You want to come in and play the high stakes poker game, even though I'm going to take all your money. So that's how that worked. They estimated $7 million was stolen from the poker victims alone. So $7 million, that's a nice hunk of money. FBI Director Kash Patel called the fraud mind-boggling, involving tens of millions of dollars across both schemes. This has been going on for quite a while from what I understand. So all 3 NBA figures were arraigned following their arrest. The NBA placed Billups and Rozier on leave and pledged full cooperation with federal authorities. The scandal has triggered a broader review of NBA gambling policies and raised concerns about the league's vulnerability to organized crime. Oh, they act like this is like the first day this stuff's happened. I mean, Joe Namath will tell you in his autobiography that the Mafia runs the sports betting game. I mean, Joe Namath was shaving points. We know that. He's admitted it. So now I'm going to go through a list of names because I saw somebody speaking up in social media like, well, they're doing is picking on the NBA guys. What about the mob guys? Nobody's naming them. So I'm going to name them. Ernest Aiello. Now, I do know that there are a lot of Aiellos in Cleveland, Ohio. Then there's Nelson Alvarez. They call him Spanish G. There's Luis Apicella. They call him Lou App. Amar Awade. They call him Flappy. That's a stupid mob name. Hey, Flappy, get over here. Saul Betcher. Then there's Matthew Dadino. They call him Matty the Wrestler. He must like to wrestle or something. I would guess. Lee Fama, Joe Gallo, Marco Garzone, Thomas Gallardo, they call him Juice, Jamie Gillette, Tony Goodson, they call him Black Tony. Hey, Black Tony. Then there's Kenny Han, could be Kenny Han, maybe. I can't read. Then there's Osman Hody. They call him the Albanian Bruce or Big Bruce. Horatio Who. They call him H. I wonder why they call him H. Horatio Who. Then there's Zhen Hu. They call him Johnny Chan or Screwly or Stanley. Those are stupid. I like Johnny Chan. That's the best. Johnny Chan. Come on. Joseph Lonnie. There's John Mazzola. They call him John South. Curtis Meeks. They call him Kurt. Well, these mob guys need to work on their mob names. Like they were way cooler back in like the 90s. Then there's Nicholas Minucci, Michael Renzulli, Anthony Ruggiero. So the Ruggiero name, that's a big one. Do your research. I'm not going to do it for you. Anthony Schneiderman. He might be Jewish. I'm not sure. They call him Doc. Robert Stroud, they call him Black Rob. So you got Black Tony and Black Rob. Seth Trussman. Sophia Way. Sophia Way is a woman, maybe. And they call her Pookie. You know how many Pookies I know? I know probably 50 Pookies. They got to do better. Julius Ziliani. They call him Jay. So what I've noticed with this list is the mob's not just doing business with Italians exclusively anymore. We're seeing different, there's some Indian names in there. There's some probably Middle Eastern names in there. There's some Chinese names in there. There's some British names in there. So you're seeing the mob is starting to do what the Russian mafia does, where they don't stay exclusively to Russia. They do business with whoever's got money. And the Cosa Nostra used to be very strict about who they did business with. They wouldn't have just done business with anybody. They kept their circle very tight. So this is an interesting thing that maybe they've gone through some kind of evolution to expand their enterprises. So FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed that the bust targeted La Cosa Nostra, specifically the Bonanno, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchese families, calling it a system of justice against organized crime that had infiltrated both sports betting and poker fraud. The FBI indictments refer to Player 3 in a key text message. Get a big bet on Milwaukee tonight. Player 3 is out tonight. This message was sent before February 9th, 2023 Lakers-Bucks game. Who plays for the Lakers? Oh, that was when LeBron James was ruled out with ankle soreness. So who tipped off the bookies that LeBron wasn't playing? That was Damon Jones, who's been indicted. Now, multiple outlets, including ESPN, report that Player 3 is very likely LeBron James and Player 4 is implied to be Anthony Davis, the unibrow Anthony Davis. So who leaked the info? Damon Jones, LeBron's former teammate and unofficial assistant coach during the 2023 season, is accused of leaking LeBron's injury status to illegal gamblers. Jones allegedly used his access to Lakers locker room intel to help bettors place wagers before sportsbooks adjusted the odds. Is LeBron accused of anything? No, not right now. So LeBron is not charged and is not listed as a defendant in the incident. Prosecutors have not alleged that LeBron knowingly participated in any betting scheme. LeBron has publicly stated he was unaware of the leak and had no involvement in insider betting. LeBron remains a subject of interest, not a target. So they haven't completely ruled LeBron out, but he's not a target, but he is a person of interest. His name appears in the narrative only because his injury status was exploited by others. That's what they're saying now. Unless new evidence emerges, LeBron faces no legal or league consequences. So Stephen A. Smith, he gets on ESPN after this happened and says one of the dumbest things I've ever heard him say. So I'm 50-50 on Stephen A. Smith. Sometimes he gets on TV and I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Thanks, Stephen A. Smith. You finally sound like you have a brain. And then other times he gets on TV and he says the dumbest shit I've ever heard. Well, the other day he said some of the dumbest shit I ever heard. So he gets on and he says, the FBI's high-profile press conference announcing the arrest of NBA figures and Mafia members as non-coincidental and a statement. He suggested the bust was part of Trump's retaliation against perceived enemies, saying this is just the tip of the iceberg. Everybody better brace themselves because he's coming. And then Stephen A. tied Trump's history with casinos and sports culture to the crackdown. He said Trump has a long history connected to the world of sports because he had those casinos. This is his kind of connection. He speculated that the WNBA could be next, citing ongoing protests against Trump. Don't be surprised if the WNBA is next on his list. This man is coming. So Stephen A. Smith is a complete retard. Oops, I'm not supposed to say that word, but he is. So Stephen A. Smith, he gets out there and he says these things without elaborating on any context about how, if Donald Trump was doing this, how this would hurt his own business, how this would hurt his own line of things. This is not an attack by Trump. Stephen A. Smith is justifying, saying, oh, these guys aren't doing anything wrong. Point shaving is wrong. What's the point of busting your ass as a young kid to learn the skills that you need to make it to high school basketball, to make it to college basketball, and then eventually get into the pros if they're just going to fix the games? It's pointless. And so Trump's doing I don't want to say Trump because Kash Patel's running the show. Kash Patel is doing the right thing. If the NBA's dirty, they're dirty. Stephen A. Smith just has to deal with it. And I know that Stephen A. Smith gets his rocks off on defending the NBA at all costs because that's what he does. And LeBron James is like his idol and best friend of all time. But if they're dirty, they're dirty. It's just like if they go into the NFL and find all the gambling and point shaving they do there. I love the NFL. I religiously watch the NFL. I'm a huge Indianapolis Colts fan, which we just beat the shit out of the Tennessee Titans today. But however, if the NFL's dirty, they're dirty. Clean them up. If this isn't real sports, then let's just sell the NFL, the NBA, baseball, hockey. Let's just sell it to Vince McMahon and let him turn it into entertainment television. I don't want to see entertainment television. If I want to see that, I'll watch the WWE. I don't want to watch that. I want to watch real gladiators competing in real sports for real trophies. That's what I want to see. So I don't want to see this gambling in professional sports. People can gamble on it because that's what we do. We all have, if you're
if you're a sports person, generally you're probably going to have made a bet on something at some point, whether it's a straight head-to-head, like I'll bet you Ohio State beats Michigan this year, or Michigan beats Ohio State. You go head-to-head. But the people who really get into it, they dissect the injury reports. They go through all these things. Who's getting a divorce? Who's having a baby? Who's got something on their mind? Who's going through depression? Like, there's a lot of science to placing a bet in the betting world. And I'm okay with that. I don't do it personally. I don't like betting. I'm not a gambling type of person. I like to play. If it's not a 80% odds of winning, I don't like to do it. I don't even really like to do scratch off tickets because the chances of me winning are slim. But people are going to do it. Now, the players should not be allowed to do it. You look at Pete Rose in baseball. He got a lifetime ban for betting on the Reds to win. And these guys were fixing games. Like you saw where Chauncey Billups was taking Rozier out of games. Like that was one of your best scorers. You were taking him out of a game when you were down. Why would you do that? Because you're trying to point shave. And that's where this is wrong. And I'm sure that with the area that LeBron comes from in Akron, Ohio, which is the same area that Maurice Clarett is from, who played for Ohio State, who went to prison and basically screwed his whole career up. Now I'm going to tell you a story about Ohio State. And I didn't plan to do this. It just came up, and it kind of will tell you about the area. Like I said, the Ayalo fella is from Cleveland. So if anybody's ever watched the movie Kill the Irishman, it's about a guy named Danny Green. And Danny Green was from Cleveland, and he went to war with the Italian Mafia. Now, there's a college in Cleveland. It's actually in Berea, but it's called Baldwin Wallace University. Baldwin Wallace University is called Mafia University because all the New York mob bosses and capos, they send all their kids there. If you look at Baldwin Wallace's football roster, it's full of Italians. If you look at the school down the street in Alliance, Ohio, which is Mount Union, one of the winningest college football programs in history, half of their roster is full of Italians. It is a huge mob area. Now, also to add to it, you go down the road to Youngstown, Ohio. Youngstown, Ohio is a major mob town. It's have a lot of Italians. A lot of murder happens in Youngstown. Now, what does that have to do with Ohio State? Back in the day, there was a coach for Baldwin Wallace University, and it was Jim Tressel's father. This is where Jim Tressel got his coaching career started, was at Baldwin Wallace University. Now, let's see. I haven't shared this theory with a lot of people, but I like to pay attention to things, and I've been watching this thing play out for a very long period of time. So Baldwin Wallace University was built up, and it came time to where Jim Tressel's dad retired. So Jim Tressel took over as coach at Baldwin Wallace. Then Jim Tressel worked his coaching resume up and then took a job at Youngstown State. So he went from mob college to mob college. Then Jim Tressel became one of the winningest coaches in Division I, 2A college football history. Youngstown State was a powerhouse when he was there. National championships galore. Go look it up. So then Ohio State had a coaching vacancy. Jim Tressel was hired as Ohio State coach. Jim Tressel has instant success, wins a national championship. Now, Maurice Clarett got in trouble. He was a running back, a freshman running back. He was Big Ten Freshman of the Year, was a sure lock to be a legend at Ohio State. Maurice Clarett in the offseason after the national championship game gets busted in Akron, Ohio. And they find that he has an SUV full of guns and bulletproof vest. and all this stuff that makes it look like, what do you have all this stuff in your car for? He gets arrested, goes to prison. Now, Maurice Claret screwed up. There was a game, and he didn't do what he was supposed to do. And Maurice Claret lost some Italian folks a lot of money. So Maurice Claret thought that he was going to die. So Maurice Claret he went everywhere he could with guns and Kevlar and anything to protect himself because he thought he was going to die. Now, Maurice Claret goes to prison. Jim Tressel gets caught up into the tattoo gate. Jim Tressel was a dirty, dirty coach all the way around. Yeah, he's a successful guy, but he was dirty. Everywhere he went, he was dirty. You can go backtrack his coaching history. He was owned by the Italian Mafia. And he was point shaving. Now, I remember when I was younger and we were watching Ohio State games, me and my dad and my brother, we would get so mad because Ohio State would get out to these early leads in the games, and especially against like the bum teams back then, like Indiana. We would get up by like 21 points on Indiana in the first quarter, and then Tressel would call the dogs off, and he would play almost like a prevent defense the rest of the game. And it would allow teams like Indiana and Purdue to climb back in the game. If you go back and look at the point spreads of those games, Ohio State never covered the spread in games they were favored in like 20 points or more. They never did because Jim Tressel was owned by the mob. Now, that gives you a little back history. Ohio is a dirty, dirty, corrupt state. So, like all you Kentucky people think y'all got it bad. We got it bad too, just in a whole other different level. We have like legit organized crime in Ohio, and it's been there for over 100 years. So we're going to move into that because there's a connection between a case that I'm working on and Ohio. So we're going to talk about it and dig in. The sweater vest. My dad reminded me of Jim Tressel's sweater vest. We used to get so mad because Ohio State, we had all the talent in the world. We would get out to a big lead, and then we'd call the dogs off, and we'd win by like 3. We'd be like, what are we doing? You know, then Urban Meyer came in, and he didn't play that. He would blow people out. And then we got Coach Day. He likes to blow people out too. So those days I think the days of the mob controlling Ohio State is over. But anyway, which I think Tressel's back at Youngstown State or something. He's out of college. He's like the athletic director somewhere. Thank God he ain't at Ohio State no more. So I'm going to cover a case. This one isn't the one. We got 2 cases I'm going to cover. So Pike County, I talk a lot about Pike County. Pike County is on the Kentucky-West Virginia border. So Pike County's in Kentucky. Now on the other side of the border is West Virginia. So a lot of stuff that happens in Pike County is connected to this Mingo County in West Virginia, which is similar. They're very similar areas. A lot of backwoods, tiny towns, small businesses, a lot of mountainous areas, dangerous terrain. So we're going to talk about a former sheriff that they had. So Sheriff Eugene Crum from Mingo County, West Virginia, he was actually assassinated in Mingo County, April 3rd of 2013, just 3 months into his term as sheriff. So why would that happen? He did a lot in those 3 months, and we're going to talk about it. Many believe it was retaliation for his aggressive crackdown on drug trafficking. Now, I got some breaking information to add to that I just got today that I need to take the time to look into before I talk about it. But it changes the narrative. I'll tell you that. If it's true, it changes the narrative. So I'll let everybody know as soon as I know something. So Walter Eugene Crum was a longtime law enforcement officer in Mingo County. He was a corrections officer. He was a police chief of this little town called Delbarton. He was a magistrate judge. He was a special investigator for the prosecutor's office. This guy's got an extensive criminal justice history. He became sheriff of Mingo County January 1st of 2013, and right away he launched Operation Zero Tolerance, targeting illegal prescription pill distribution and drug dealers. So the murder. So Crum was shot and killed while he was eating lunch in a parked cruiser near a former pill mill pharmacy. It was a pharmacy that they were basically handing out opiates to everybody. And he had helped shut it down. So he was making sure that they didn't restart operation. The shooter was a guy named Tennis Melvin Maynard. He was a 37-year-old local man. Now, there may be a backstory behind this between the two. Now, I'm not going to talk about it yet. Like I said, I got to look into it. After the shooting, Maynard fled and was shot by a deputy during a chase in Del Barton. He was hospitalized and later charged. So authorities did not immediately confirm a motive, but many locals and officials believe Crum's anti-drug efforts made him a target. Crum had already secured 57 felony convictions in just 93 days as sheriff. 57 felony convictions in 93 days as sheriff. That's a guy who came in and got stuff done. It's impressive. I don't care what you say. That's getting it done. That's like on Donald Trump level of getting it done. His death shocked the community and led to calls for greater protection for law enforcement officers, especially in regions battling drug epidemics. I'm going to put Sheriff Crum's picture up. There's Sheriff Crum. And so he made it a habit to eat lunch in his cruiser parked near the closed pharmacy, keeping watch to ensure it didn't reopen and resume illegal activity. He was doing a great job. This location had been a hot spot for prescription pill trafficking, and Crum had personally led efforts to shut it down as part of Operation Zero Tolerance. Sounds like he didn't have a whole lot of backup from his officers. Maybe there's not enough officers. Small community. They could have been dealing with that much drug activity and not having a budget to really maintain that with extra officers probably was a problem. So that case is that. I'm still looking into some things, but that's the gist of the assassination of Sheriff Eugene Crum. Now, this next case that I did in Mingo County is very, very interesting. It involves a former coal executive named Ben Hatfield. Now, you have to remember, this is like the Hatfield and McCoy's area of Kentucky. So, and believe me, the Hatfields and McCoys are still doing things. Believe that. He was murdered in Mingo County, West Virginia, May of 2016, while visiting his late wife's grave. Two men, Anthony Arriaga and Brandon Fitzpatrick, were convicted and sentenced to life in prison for the crime. Now, when I first read this, and I've already made a TikTok about this, and probably some of you West Virginia people that I hopefully are going to watch this are going to go, yeah, we already know. Anthony Arriaga, that name jumped out to me as soon as I read it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I know that name. So then I kept reading on. And so the crime, the victim was Ben Hatfield. He was 59 years old, former president and CEO of Patriot Coal. Hatfield's body was found the next day after he was shot. So the perpetrators, Anthony Arriaga, he is listed as from Delphos, Ohio. Delphos, Ohio is where my family's from. And then it hit me. I'm like, I know who Anthony Arriaga is, which he wasn't born and raised in Delphos. He's from Lima. And so going back to our Mafia story. So there's Lima, Ohio is the midpoint between Chicago and New York City. So back in the 20s, when Al Capone would drive to New York for meetings, he would stop and spend the night in Lima, Ohio. Lima had already had an Italian influence there. And so Al Capone being Al Capone, every time he would stop there, he would impregnate somebody. So Lima is full of Al Capone's descendants. And Delphus and Lima literally are right beside each other. Like you could throw a stone and hit Lima from Delphus. So Lima is a mob town. Don't get it twisted. Our sheriff's name is Matt Triglia, which he's not a mobster. He's actually a good guy. But there's so many Italians there. And there was a war there back in the day between the Irish mob and the Italian mob. And it was the Milanos went to war with, I think it was the Millers. So the city is split. The north half is where, like in the Bath area, is where all the Irish went. And then the rest of the city was, since the Italians won, they had the rest of the city. And it's still that way today. So Anthony Arriaga from Delphus, Ohio, he was partnered up with Brandon Fitzpatrick. And both of these guys at the time were 20 years old. From Louisa, Kentucky, which is a ways away from where this happened. So the police are claiming that the pair intended to rob someone and targeted Hatfield for his vehicle, a GMC Denali. Arriaga approached Hatfield from behind and shot him in the back. Hatfield fled but collapsed and died over a hill near the cemetery. His body was found after relatives reported him missing. Arriaga fled the scene, changed clothes, and traveled to Ohio. He was arrested there after police tracked his phone. Fitzpatrick was later arrested in Kentucky on unrelated drug charges and extradited to West Virginia. There was a third man, Ricky Peterson. He was charged as an accessory after the fact for helping Arriaga and initially lying to police. Anthony Arriaga, convicted of first-degree murder, robbery, and conspiracy, was sentenced to life with mercy. He is actually eligible for parole in 2031. And so is Brandon Fitzpatrick, got the same deal. So there's more to this story than what meets the eye. I will tell you that Anthony Arriaga is not a car thief. So I don't know anything about Brandon Fitzpatrick, but I do know who Anthony Arriaga is. So it's weird that in my investigation that my world collided with this world. And it's very interesting that it happened that way. So that's some fruit for thought. I'm going to keep digging into that and seeing what else I can find out. It seems like this Mingo County in West Virginia is a very interesting place to look into. A lot of things are happening there. So I'm going to stick around for a while and see what I can dig up. But I am, that's pretty much it for my show today. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I love the Mafia stuff. I consider myself a historian. It's exciting stuff to me, and a lot of it revolves around my hometown area. So like it's something I pay a lot of attention to. I know most of these people anyway, but I'm out. Peace.